So if we're holding trauma from the past and we're holding on to a small version of ourselves, it's going to be hard to create something new because we're creating from the same pattern and the same way of thinking. And so the work that I do really invites women to interrupt, to have an intervention on themselves, so to speak, which is to be aware of the predictable future. What are the things that I tell myself? What is my self-talk? What is it that I believe about the world? And under those beliefs and assumptions and patterns, what's the future that I'm going to have? And what is it going to take to have an entirely new future where the trajectory of my life is altered completely by the choices that I'm taking now?
You're listening to the Woman of Value podcast. You are about to hear the story of a woman who is following her dreams and passions and creating positive change in the world. Jolie Dawn is the author of Empowered, Sexy, and Free, and she's the creator of the Dare to Prosper Challenge, the largest women's prosperity meditation gathering online, which is attended by women in more than 50 countries. She is a specialist in helping women awaken their prosperity consciousness, embody their deepest truth, and reclaim personal freedom and creativity. She's an intuitive business coach and writer, and the founder of Prosperity Queendom Inc, which is an online business training platform for spiritual entrepreneurs. She lives in Hawaii. Welcome to the show, Jolie.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Let's start where I always start, which is, what does woman of value mean to you, Jolie?
I love this question. And as I pondered it, I really sat with the definition and what I believe the word value to mean. And value is the degree to which something is useful. And I really take this lifetime and my being as a high desire to be useful to others. And so a woman of value is a woman who knows herself to be useful, that prioritizes her service, that sees this life as a sacred journey of her dharma, to live her truth, to give something valuable to the world. And for me, that means to be so curious about my purpose and the ways in which I desire to serve humanity, and to understand people and to be a part of the evolution of this species on the planet.
Wow, that was very rich and deep, and I love it. So let's talk about the moment, that pivotal moment when you realized your value, you realized the worth that you're discussing right now, and your purpose in giving something back to the world.
My spiritual journey started in my early 20s out of necessity. I was in a lot of emotional pain and I didn't know a way out. And in 2008, after a long saga with the economic collapse in America and it hitting my family really hard, my dad made the very permanent decision to end his life when I was 20 years old. So I was processing the trauma of his suicide and processing myself being a young woman entering the world and going through this rite of passage that is college and that is early 20s. And I immediately found myself in a relationship with a man who was 12 years my senior, who was very successful, very generous with me. We had just a really lovely relationship. Unconsciously, I had projected a lot of dad onto him. And after 4 years in this relationship, after being engaged to get married, after planning all of our children, he surprise broke up with me. And the soul searching that I had to do after that, because it was father's suicide, major breakup, I had felt at 25 years old. They call this the quarter life crisis. At 25, I just felt so valueless. I felt like I was late to the game of career. All of my friends that were my peers in college had gotten started, and I felt like I was frozen in time. And I remember how brave that version of me was, and the connection to my own inner spirit and to my value. And it's a time that I remember distinctly being in the conversation around my value and my worth, because I felt so worthless, because I felt not important enough as a daughter for my dad to stay on the planet. I felt not important enough as a partner, as a fiance, for my partner to stay with me. And this is when I got really connected to my spiritual practices because it was such a painful experience. And I'm so proud of that 25-year-old because it took her 1 year to create a 6-figure thriving business. And she did it through lots of meditation, lots of self-discovery, lots of meeting the hard emotions and sitting with my journal and processing my pain. And I feel like the woman that I am now, many years into my 30s now, I look back on that 25-year-old version and I was like, I can just feel her strength and I can feel her commitment to life. And upon reflecting of that time period, it really took me feeling so worthless to discover what worth actually was.
I can't imagine going through all of that emotional pain at such a young age, and also like really being able to recover so quickly within 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a feat. So can you talk to us about what are some of the things that you did to help you recover?
A huge part of my healing path was writing. And first, that comes before that is studying the universal laws of how does this reality actually work? And how does one win at this game of life? These are the questions that I was asking myself. And of course, like many people on their beginning spirituality and awakening path, I discovered the law of attraction, and it made sense to me. Oh, I get to run a particular type of energy in my body, and my energy and my frequency in the way of being, my thoughts, my feelings, this whole inner world of this being is being reflected by my outer worlds. And I get to be really responsible for what shows up in my outer world. So I started playing with these laws of the universe, like the law of assumption, assuming your best reality, your highest desire, the law of attraction, the law of divine reciprocity and divine compensation. And that what I give out comes back to me. That's kind of the rules of the game that we're playing here. So I started studying these laws. I started getting very interested in it. I started asking these big questions of life. I wanted more from my life. And writing was the practice that I implemented these learnings and these lessons. And I would write to spirit, and I would write to myself. I would write to life in general, and I would ask for things. I would make big requests. And then I would practice and start tracking what manifestations were coming, and like really getting to know my inner world and developing self-awareness through writing and actually talking to myself. I'm an air sign, I'm a Gemini, so lots of fast thoughts and lots of communication. So writing is a medium that I can really plug into. And I started writing every single day. I started developing a practice of writing to my money. I felt so broken around money. I felt like money was this thing that was meant for people who grew up around money. I thought it was meant for people who did much better in college than I did, who were much more disciplined than I was. I had so many stories about money and wealth was for people that just weren't me, wasn't me. I couldn't see that of myself. And I knew that I wanted to. And I knew there was a discrepancy there of the life that I want is an abundant life. I desire prosperity. I want the freedom to do what I want, to give in the ways that I want to give. I want to live freely in this world. And I also understand that I'm the one preventing myself from experiencing that. So really willing to take radical ownership and self-responsibility for what was showing up in my life. Okay, I have $0 in my bank account. That's me. That's me. The only way that I can change this is through me believing another story about who I am and what I'm capable of. So I wrote letters to money every single day. Money, I am so sorry that I'm blaming you for all the stress and turmoil of my life. I'm sorry that I'm blaming you for the reason why my father left the planet, having chose to left the planet. And I'm sorry for blaming all of my stress onto you. What I actually want is a harmonious relationship with you. So it was like I would take these entities and I would make them relationships. And I've developed a relationship with my money. And I started tracking all my very little wins. Every tiny little win, I would track it. Every miracle that came in, I would expand that energy. Oh, yes, universe, I want more of that one. And I did the same thing with my body and healing my body. I had some really serious health issues, and I would talk to my body and ask her what she needed. I would talk to my future self. I would borrow energy from my future self. And so the practice that had me really connected to self-awareness, really connected to myself, and really in touch with my desires, and where there was a discrepancy on those desires, was through the medium of writing.
Interesting. So you're talking to money, you're talking to your body, you're talking to all these different parts. And I'm just wondering, for people listening to this podcast and who are struggling, let's say, with money, what advice would you give them? You know, it sounds like you interrogated some of your beliefs around money, your limiting beliefs. Like, how could they get started? Maybe they don't feel comfortable talking to their money. Maybe they think that's woo-woo for them. Who knows?
I would invite you to get a little woo-woo. I think this whole reality is woo-woo. I think this human experience is beyond our level of understanding. And to bring in a belief system that is beyond you, believing in something beyond you, is the way that I know how to manifest. It's the way that I know how to get my needs met from this life, is knowing that there's a force of love, a glue, a designer that holds this all together in whatever term that resonates with you. And from the practical level, I think it's getting really connected to where you are right now, where you want to be, and what is that discrepancy. Really telling the truth about how far away you are from that version of yourself that you desire. And it takes, I will say, it takes a bit of audacity to see yourself as a person to prosper in this lifetime. Because what starts to happen is our brain gets really confronted, and our brain is really quite simple in its function. It's very complex and simple at the same time. The simplicity of the function is the lizard brain, or the amygdala, has a function of keeping us safe at all times. And so if that's running in the background, am I safe? It's that fight or flight. It's that, am I going to survive? It's our survival instincts. And to do something audacious like out earn your father, or to out earn your friend circle, is a threat to human belonging. And a threat to human belonging is a threat to human survival. And so I would ask you a few questions. First of all, are you willing to prosper? It comes down to that. Are you willing? There was times in my life where I just wasn't willing to. I couldn't see myself that big. Are you willing to have your needs met? Are you willing to live a beautiful life where you get to do what you want to do? You get to give in the ways that you want to give. You get to free yourself from the constraints of scarcity. And I can teach in this way. And I think that so many people are drawn to my work in this way because I know the grips of scarcity. I know what it feels like to have that panic keep you up at night, to not know how the bills are getting paid, and to be in debilitating fear because there's just not enough. I know that when scarcity increases, creativity decreases. So it's this really vicious cycle of being trapped in the feeling of lack. And the more that you're generating the feeling of lack, the more that that's showing up in your external reality. And so I would ask the listener here to get really bold and audacious and ask yourself, am I willing? And of course you would say superficially, of course I want to prosper. Of course I want more money. Of course I want my life to work in every possible way. But when you get really down to it, what version of you does that threaten? Maybe there's a smaller version of yourself that has to be let go in order for the bigger version to rise. What would it be like if you out-earned your friend circle and your community? What would it be like if you out-earned your family? Would you be willing to see yourself as that big? Because it really comes down to our unconscious mind trying to keep us safe at all times, and being different and being big and being bright and being wildly prosperous is a threat to that safety.
Definitely resonates for me. I remember that Marianne Williamson quote about, we are more afraid of our brilliance than we are of our, being small. And that was such an aha moment for me, because at that point I was hiding. I had been hiding most of my life and was brought up in a world of lack, always we don't have enough. We, don't spend that money. We don't have enough. And I remember even in my marriage, we always were scrappy. We had to save every penny and go and look for all the sales. And when I look back, there was no clarity around money. It was just don't spend it. And now, once I got divorced, I started to really look at money and not make it this amorphous kind of nebulous thing that has an emotion attached to it, which is how so many of us look at it. It's this like magical thing that we don't really understand. And I found for myself, the more I understood money, what was really happening, what did I really want in my life, what do I want it for? Like you mentioned, do you want to live this beautiful life? Do you want to live in a place where you're free from the grips of scarcity? Yes. Who doesn't? But most of us don't really see this as a choice. And we get stuck in this mindset of small.
Yeah. And that exactly the word around choice is taking radical responsibility for your life and your reality in every single way. And all of us come into this world with different upper hands and different privileges. I'm really aware of my privileges, and I get more connected to the privilege of whatever this body is and whatever the gifts that I came in the culture that I came into, and the economy that I get to plug into in the Western world. Those are all upper hands. And then I know what are my disadvantages. I know the life that I grew up in around two parents that struggled with addiction, that both of them left this planet in lots of debt. And I did not learn the money codes. I didn't learn it from my family. And there was a lot of Christian ministers on my mother's side where to earn money and to desire money is not a spiritual thing. So there was a lot in my lineage that I had to reclaim for myself. Like, this is a very spiritual and noble life that I live. The amount of people that I'm able to help, the impact that I'm able to be. I get to write books in my free time and give the wisdom that I'm learning because I have the resource to do that. And there's wealth on the planet anyway. And if we really take a step back and look at who are the people holding the big wealth on the planet, and what are we doing? What are they doing with that wealth? I have my own personal judgments, admittedly, and I would just love to see wealth in the hands of more women. There is a very particular frequency that women hold around the compassionate heart and the ability to see the other. And I think that that's what's missing in this world. If we zoom out and look at a global scale of, is humanity working as it is right now? Lots of people would argue we need some big upgrades in the human psyche for us to live in a world that works for everyone. Prosperity for everyone. Everybody gets to feed their children. Everybody gets access to education. Everybody gets to pursue their dreams. What world would that be like? And I care so much about liberating women specifically because I know the female heart. She is the mother, and the planet, the mother, is what's needing our attention most right now. And I see women in big meetings, boardrooms, being big decision makers, having influence and power to dream up a society that works for everyone, including women in this seat in those tables.
Well, as a woman's empowerment coach, you're speaking my language, and I love seeing women step into their power. If you have ever played small to make other people feel comfortable, or maybe stayed in a bad relationship or job too long because you didn't think you could do any better, I wrote a book for you. It's called Becoming a Woman of Value: How to Thrive in Life and Love. Each of the 30 chapters contains a life lesson, a story, and an exercise to bring you closer to reaching your full potential. Becoming a Woman of Value is available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. Let's talk practical, because I know a lot of people want to know, like, okay, you've shared some of the questions people can ask themselves, but I know you have programs and you obviously earn money doing the work you do. So take us to, how do you work with people, and what's your process?
Yeah, so a few ways. I am an author and I write lots of things. And in my book, Empowered, Sexy, and Free, I write about how to take that really spiritual journey inward to get to know yourself. Because anything that we want on the external, like I mentioned before, this law of attraction, the law of assumption, first begins with us. So if we're holding trauma from the past and we're holding on to a small version of ourselves, it's going to be hard to create something new because we're creating from the same pattern and the same way of thinking. And so the work that I do really invites women to interrupt, to have an intervention on themselves, so to speak, which is to be aware of the predictable future. What am I operating in right now? What are the thoughts? What are the things that I tell myself? What is my self-talk? What is it that I believe about the world? And under those beliefs and assumptions and patterns, what's the future that I'm going to have? And what is it going to take to have an entirely new future where the trajectory of my life is altered completely by the choices that I'm taking now? And I think back to that 25-year-old version of myself, and she altered the trajectory of my life. The life that I live is a very blessed life. I wake up every day. The first thing that I say is, thank you so much that I get to be here. The utter gratitude that I live in, it's a practice. Believe me, there are days where there are things that I want to say other than gratitude the first thing in the morning. There are moments in my life where I'm stretched, I'm triggered, and yeah, life feels hard. There's seasons of that. And the practice of being in gratitude, the practice of really choosing to be here, we didn't get pushed on the bus and thrown into this experience. I believe that in every soul contract, there was a deeper meaning to be here. There's a reason, there's a spiritual lesson you're getting out of this. Otherwise, you would just be in spirit form. You wouldn't have incarnated into a body. So on this, when we bring it back down to a practical level, somebody who is believing that they can't, or believing in their own limits, it first starts with being aware that that's the conversation. We're so connected to the conversation. We don't even know that that's what we're saying. We just think that's the way that life is. I think that beautiful example you said in your marriage, like we weren't really thinking about prosperity. All we knew is that we had to be really mindful of scarcity. We weren't thinking of the bigger plan. We weren't strategizing on how to get ahead. We weren't dreaming and posting pictures on our Pinterest vision board of the vacations we'd be taking and aligning our energy to that future desire. Oftentimes, it's just, this is the way that life is. It's hard, and making money is hard. And affording college is hard, and affording housing is hard, and gas prices are so expensive. And there's this collective conversation of scarcity that becomes the norm that we align to. And it takes a really brave person to be listening to something like this, to be inspired and be like, wow, I'm setting some big limits on myself. Wow, what if I could create a new trajectory of my future? What if something else was possible for me? What would I have to admit about myself? Maybe I'd have to admit how hard I'm being on myself and how limited my thinking is. And the listeners being here now is tuning into a podcast to get a spiritual truth, to hear different opinions. And so if you're listening to this, you're on a great path because you're taking in a lot of wisdom, and it shows your commitment to yourself, even just being here listening.
It's true. And awareness is always the first step. As you said, be aware of what you're saying to yourself. And I find it as a dating coach as well, that we tend to think very small about our relationships and the possibility of finding someone and finding the right match. You know, does it even exist? Am I totally hopeless? Can you help me? And, you know, in your conversation just now, you mentioned the word hard several times. And I think we have to be aware of our language. You know, if we're walking around saying, this is hard, life is hard, it's hard to make money, it's hard to find a relationship, it's hard. That's what we're telling ourselves. And so change the conversation, watch your language, because it really makes a difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And if that's the story, all of this is hard. Guess what you're going to keep getting? Really hard experiences. And I will never downplay the challenge of entrepreneurship. I will never downplay the initiation, the rite of passage that this has been for me in the last 8 years of building this business, and there's a momentum and there's an enjoyment in the challenge. And the way that we typically think about something hard is like devoid of pleasure. And I actually, with every launch that I do and everything that I create and the books that I publish and everything that I output and exert myself for, even when I'm challenged and even when things do feel hard, and that's the only word that I can use to describe the way that my experience feels right now, because of my spiritual practice and because of my devotion to life, I'm able to be the observer and to take a step back and know that this is a moment in time. This too shall pass, like everything. Stay really present to being in the moment and not get so tripped up about the future and trying to prevent every possible worst case scenario.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that it's not always the same. Like it's not like waking up with gratitude every day doesn't mean that there aren't hard times. And entrepreneurship is a bumpy road. It's not all unicorns and roses, but yeah, as an entrepreneur myself, I think about my own journey and how I got here. And it is with a lot of work, but the work is joyous work because I am following my purpose and my passion. And I think when you have a bigger purpose in mind, and you know you're not just in the grind and on the hamster wheel, there is so much joy in knowing that you're impacting other people, that your work is meaningful. And so I think that for everybody who thinks I can't, think about what's possible. Think about what you can do and how it can make an impact. And I've spoken to so many entrepreneurs and people who have ideas and how do I even get started? And it's, you can't think of all the steps at once. It's like one step at a time, but you just start and you keep course correcting along the way. And it's incredible. I mean, 14, 15 years ago, when I started my first business, I had no idea where it would go, but I knew I had to do it. I knew there was a calling and I had to follow it. And then it morphs into what it needs to be. So just want to give a word of encouragement out there for anybody who feels overwhelmed by, oh my God, I have ideas, but I don't know how to even get started. Just get started.
Yeah, it's embracing the journey and embracing the unknown and being willing to be in the trust fall with life. And as I was following your story, I can think of you 14 years ago and being like, you go. Like, you go, Sandy. That's amazing that you started and you didn't know where it would lead you. And in the beginning, we don't know. It's and to embrace the unknown, I think, is the highest form of courage. And the brain will, again, we have to go back to the way that the brain is working to face the unknown. It causes so much anxiety. How will this all work? And to trust yourself and to have that audacious nature, the boldness inside of you that's like, I don't know where this is leading me, but I'm going to take the first step, and I'm going to take the first step and the next step. And then all of a sudden there's momentum and things start happening and you learn along the way. And to anybody who's listening to this, is like this woman of value, bringing back this conversation of value is, for me, it's just so wrapped around service in the world. And what we know about human studies and the human psyche is that a core component of happiness, to experience true joy, lasting joy in this lifetime, rests on contribution. How much are we being a contribution to others? Do we feel like we are useful in this world? And I know that I'm here for such a temporary moment in human history. I'm a little blip on the timeline. And I spend time thinking about, what is my energetic legacy? Why did I come here at this time in history? I believe it takes a spiritual warrior to be here alive during this time, during what's happening on the planet, and so many shifts and so much division. And I know so many people listening are in the discovery of their own value and the discovery of their own contribution, and being driven by that soul yearning to give something to the world. And I think about my books. Once they're published, they're in 3D and they live forever in this time-space reality. And just getting started, you'll experience something that the book The Alchemist describes as beginner's luck. And life will hook you up in the beginning to just show you, yes, keep going. There'll be some things to show you you're on the right path. So be aware of those signs, take those signs, trust with your whole heart, let your desires lead you, because to be in question of your life and to be in review of your life while you're still here, I think is the best method to get through this place, because we're all here very temporarily. And to be in big questions of, how do I want to experience this? Am I willing to be in pleasure and joy? What would it take to live in sustained peace, like truly feeling peace at a time where humanity is experiencing record numbers of anxiety disorder, record numbers of depression? I am a warrior within myself that I'm going to create a peaceful life. I get to do things differently. I get to have right relationship with technology and social media. I do my practices. I've gotten to know myself, and I do the things that take care of me spiritually and physically and mentally to live a beautiful life.
Well, those are all choices. And I think so many of us think they're not. It only happens to the special ones who have special powers and special gifts. And we each have gifts. I think we, look for the gifts because they're there. And the other thing I just want to add to this conversation is to know your why. When you really know why you're doing something, the hard work matters less. The focus is there because you're seeing the signs, you're understanding that there are little intuitive hits that are happening, and you're paying attention. And so it doesn't all reveal itself at once, but things happen. I mean, my second business, The Woman of Value, happened because of that, because I realized I was helping women in dating, and the part I loved the most was helping them value themselves. It mattered less that they had dating tips and more that they had the inner work, because that is everything. So let's go to the future for you, and then we're going to go to the lightning round. What is happening in your future?
I'm in these very sweet years before motherhood. I'm not in partnership as of this time. And I'm really clear in the ways that I'm setting myself up right now to bring in motherhood. I have a goal of surpassing 7 figures in my business before motherhood and owning a home. And both of those things are well on their way. I'm actually in offers right now of purchasing a home, and my company got very, very close to 7 figures last year, and I know it will get there this year. So yeah, setting up my future. And the way that I think about this is I have a strong desire to live in my feminine energy. I live on the islands of Kauai and in Hawaii, and I have a 5-acre property, and I pick fruit in my backyard, and I lay in the sunshine between calls, and I just, the devotion that I have to my femininity and to living in the experience of free drives me. And so my inner male energy, my inner masculine energy is really strong. I can get a lot of things done. I can create, I lead a beautiful team. We have so many amazing products and services that we create in supporting women on their path and their journey of prosperity and business building and launching and marketing and all kinds of things. And so the future for me is continuing to understand the needs of my feminine in a world that prioritizes a masculine energy, and in a world that prioritizes achievement and creation and don't stop until you're done. And there can be so much emphasis on the material world. And I get to continually be in right relationship with my money and prosperity, and to understand exactly, as you said, the why and what drives me. So the future for me is continuing to understand the subtleties of my desires and to lead with that, and to set myself up in that way, and to be willing to live an irreverent and, dare I say, even rebellious life, to not conform to the collective consciousness, to not conform to collective fear. And it's a big reason why I've put myself out on the most remote island in the whole world, as Kauai is considered the most remote island in the entire world, because I needed a clear psychic field. And the psychic field out there was getting heavy, it's getting thick. So I removed myself and I took care of myself in that way. And so as I prepare this body for motherhood and prepare this womb and nourish myself from this land, I spend most days thinking about the value of being in the present moment and receiving all that I've created and continuing to set myself up for a beautiful life.
Sounds really wonderful. And I think that preparing yourself with such focus is going to give you everything that you desire.
Mm.
So let's go to the lightning round. You ready?
Yes.
All right. Fill in the blank. I used to think I wasn't blank enough.
I used to think that I wasn't smart enough.
I spent so much of my high school underperforming because I was bored. And then I was afraid to really find out if I was smart or not. And so it took me a long time to realize I was smart. What's your smart enough story?
Yeah, I just never really excelled at school. I barely made it through business school and college. I mean, struggle bus. I just didn't think I had that many. I just didn't relate to myself as intelligent because I was comparing it to what the Western school system deemed as intelligent. And when I understood that my superpower was creativity and writing and self-expression, that's when I started to see my gifts more. But I never thought that I would be an entrepreneur with tax planning, building an investment portfolio, and managing a team and having thousands of clients a year. Like, I just didn't think I was smart enough for it. I really didn't have that relationship to myself as thinking I was smart enough.
I think a lot of people are going to be able to relate to that one. I used to advocate for my children because they were all out of the box thinkers and not those typical Western education. They did not go in that little box. And I would come into class and talk to the teachers and say, my kid is struggling in your class. And they're like, I don't know, why does your daughter go to the bathroom all the time? Does she have a bladder problem? And I would say, no, she's bored in your class because you're not engaging her. And it's just like, here's what you can do to make this more fun for her brain. Anyway, all right, let's get to the next question in the lightning round. What was the number one thing holding you back from becoming a woman of value?
My beliefs held me back, thinking I didn't deserve it, thinking I wasn't enough, thinking I was unlovable. Belief system.
Yep, totally understand that one. What's the best advice you can give to a woman who wants to become more empowered?
To the woman starting her journey to become more empowered, I would invite a lot of patience. Patience, patience, patience. Be slow and gentle with yourself. The slow and steady actually really does win the race. The rushing to some perceived finish line is how we get burned out and we end up giving up.
Got to agree with that one. What advice would you give to your younger self?
I would just tell her she's got nothing to worry about. She was such an anxious little mess, little hot mess she was. Oh, sweet thing. Would run so much anxiety through that little body of hers. And I would just tell her that it's going to work out better than you can possibly even imagine, and that there's nothing to fear.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great if we could go back and tell our younger anxious self that?
She wouldn't even believe. She couldn't even conceive of where I am now.
Yeah, and that's why it doesn't all get revealed to us when we're young, right? We have to go through stuff to get where we are. Jolie, what is something people get wrong about you?
I love this question because people look at me and they see whatever this face is and whatever this exterior is, and they assume two things. One, that I've had a really easy life, and two, that I haven't really worked hard for what I have. And yeah, I think there's like an assumption that entrepreneurship has just always come easy for me and it's always been natural for me. And it's I have this interesting thing, Sandy, with this exterior that I've been given and this voice and this whatever this presentation is of this body, that people assume that or get wrong about me, that I'm a woman of a lot of devotion, that I'm very clear about what I want in life, and that I've been through a lot, more than your average person.
Yeah. And finally, how would you like to be remembered?
I would like to be remembered for how big I loved.
Period. End of story. I mean, what else is there, right?
Mhm. And how much love I generated and how much love I gave to others, how much care I brought into the world, doing my part to restore the feminine heart. That's my greatest wish for my life, is to have an opportunity to love as many people as I possibly can.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for this really delightful conversation. How can people find you? What's the best way?
The best way to find me is I'm on Amazon. My book is Empowered, Sexy, and Free on Amazon. So if you like my stories and you want to learn more about my past and my awakening journey, I would love to share that piece of work with you. Empowered, Sexy, and Free on Amazon. And I chronicle my life on Instagram. So if you find me interesting and you want to see behind the scenes, I'm on Instagram at Jolie Dawn XO. And for all of my offerings and to see what I'm up to and currently offering, you can go to my website at joliedawn.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today, sharing your wisdom, and really showing what a true woman of value sounds like, looks like, acts like. She doesn't have to have a certain face or exterior. It's what's inside that really shows. And it doesn't matter how old you are, because as a young woman, you have so much wisdom. So thank you.
Thank you, Sandy.
If you would like to step more fully into your value, grab a free copy of The Ultimate Guide to Becoming a Woman of Value on my website, thewomanofvalue.com. Just click the link at the top of the homepage. And if you haven't already done so, be sure to click the subscribe button in your listening app. And if there's something in this episode that inspired you, please share it with others, because the more we share these inspirational stories, the more women of value we will have in this world. I'll see you next time.